Greetings, Earthlings. This is Bill McDonald, the Writing Doctor, and today I want to show you another essay that tends to do what I call exampletory. And if your kids do this, it's good organization, but bad on development and voice because it's like you're just barely beginning to enjoy an idea, a reason, or an example, and they do what I call reader's whiplash, where they take you to the next idea too quickly. So this essay, the student does have a whistle, a hook, so I have the check mark there. My scoring guide basically uses color coding first with the main ideas that I think the student was intending. The introductions, the yellow is the central idea. If they have more than one central idea, then I would have filled in more than one yellow train here, because the train engine controls the rest of the trains. It's the center of everything. So every time there's a different reason or an example, I change colors. So if I was to color code the essay, I would use the same colors on the essay that you're seeing here, but all I do on the essay is number the lines for the students so I can help them with specific issues. So this student said that electricity was his or her most important invention because of the reason that they give light. The examples are they help us see, they keep us warm, and they help us with everyday things. Well, those first two are more specific. That one's too vague. So I would say remove the everyday thing one because it doesn't really help you with the development. But then the second reason is that you use it every day. Well, you're already using it every day because it gives you light, it helps you see, it keeps you warm. But they have some other ideas now. So using it every day is the reason. The examples are that it's delicious. You can cook delicious food using electricity, that you can clean with a vacuum, different example. And again, it says for 3s and 4s that your ideas relate to each other. Since food and vacuuming have nothing to do with each other, you don't want to use those as examples unless you can figure out how to connect them. Now, this last one here says mowing grass. That's another example of using it every day, but the problem is you don't mow grass typically with anything electrical. You use gas-powered mowers or gas-powered weed eaters. So I make a comment down here. When you're giving feedback, there's 2 revision type feedbacks that you give called development and organization. And for those of you that have the binder, it's page 507. And I know some of you like a different form that I'm going to show you in a second, but I really feel like the color coding, instead of just giving check marks, it actually shows the students how many ideas they're trying to cram down your throat. And that's why I really like this one better. One of my closest friends who teaches at a school here in the Rio Grande Valley, she uses this feedback form religiously with her students, and she ends up getting about 70 to 80% of her kids getting 3s and 4s because it helps them see when they've got too many reasons and examples. So let me look at my feedback. It says you have 3 great examples of how electricity gives light and 3 more about how you use it every day, comma, but none of them are developed. This is called exampletory. Spend 4 or 5 sentences each explaining how lights help us see and how heaters can keep us warm. I would just zoom in on those first ones there, since the other one take it a different direction. Well, let's zoom in on, we use lights a lot and we eat every day, so I would probably say, since those are the ones that are the easiest, focus on that. Organization problem, since I mentioned, since mowing the grass is done with a lawnmower, you either need to remove the reason or explain that you mow your lawn with an electric weed eater or a lawnmower, which to my knowledge, doesn't exist. And there's only one area of cups on editing that I felt was an issue. On line 12, insanely was spelled incorrectly, and on line 5, important was spelled incorrectly. And so I would have them, if they were my students, they would be having to add that to their spelling list for the next Friday, just to practice. And again, it's taking pictures of the word. Let me go ahead and show you line 12 and line 5 so you can see how they had it. Insanely, they had insanely. So if you say insane, because the vowel of the A is long, you know that you probably need an A in there somewhere. And then on line 5 we said, let's see if we can find the misspelling of the word. Trying to get the focus better for you. There it is. Important. Electricity. That's spelled okay. Important. So they put important, and then they put the T on top of the A. And so if I was working with my students, I would use two boys that don't mind being close together, and I would put one on top of the other one's shoulders to show them you can't just write letters on top of letters. That T and the A have to be in two different places, not in the same place. And there's only one N in important, not two. So it would just be them taking a picture of the correct version of the word and practicing it. So for those of you who like the other form, this is the quick check scoring guide. Whenever you're in a hurry, you can either just use the front side, and so this is from page 505. On this you can score 5 essays, and as you see, it shows you how to get zeros, what the scoring rubric for the adult scoring guide says, how to get a 1, a 2, a 3, or a 4. And as you can see, I put in there 2+ and 2+. Since there's no such thing as 2+, I'm just letting the student know that I did have a couple of areas that I felt it was good enough to be a 3, but because of the lack of development of the examples, it leaned more towards a 2. So here's my checks. That it was an expository essay focused on the prompt, yes, check. It was a clear central idea statement with a good introduction and closing. Not so much on the closing because it was restating. If you notice here in the last train, the caboose, I wrote restating because they just kind of said the same thing that they had already said. But they did have a good introduction because, let me read it to you. It says, do your parents and do you our parents, so we're going to work on that, cook and clean in the house a lot? Because we talked about, remember, cooking down here and cleaning down here. Well, if you're going to go ahead and keep that question, then I would ask questions about the cooking and cleaning. But since the student does more light turning on and using heaters in the winter, I would probably say it would be easier for a student to write about electricity for light and being warm, because less students do the cooking at the house, and at least at my home, not very many kids do the vacuuming. So the next bullet says, I've got repetition, there's a flow, or the flow is kind of weak because they're whiplashing the reader from one idea to the next. Irrelevant development. So that's because none of these details. How does it keep us warm? When does it help us see? What way, what kind of a light do you use? How and where and when, and what kind of switches do you need? Do you need these lights more during the day or at night? even though we live in South Texas, this person lives in a different part of Texas, so they can talk about how they would be affected because of the cold weather if there was no electricity to be able to turn on the heater or those little box units that a lot of people have instead of central air or central heat. Okay, and then continuing on, it's somewhat formulaic because they're using basic transition words in the essay. Let me explain. Furthermore, another reason, as you can see, I don't mind starting with a question, but the student did a good job of asking a question about one of his reasons. I just don't want a question about the prompt. For example, do you think inventions are important? That's what I don't want. I don't mind this kind of question, but just make sure you ask a question about the reason, example, or the idea that you're going to be using, so that it would be a good question that ties together with the essay. So there you go. The last part is that the grammar is pretty good, but mainly because of the ideas not relating together and not developing. This is more of a 2 paper than a 3 paper, so I call this a 2-3 paper because there's nothing in the 1 section. God bless you guys. I hope that you like the 2 different ways. I score 1 is on page 505, and so what you can do, instead of giving the feedback here on page 507, after doing the quick check, you can just flip the paper over and you can be grader number 1 and or grader number 2. If you have a lot of things to say, then you can give both grades like I did, and then maybe give some areas, some comments on development and organization on this side, and some comments on conventions, the editing part, on this side. Just a suggestion. Again, the dotted line is so that you can grade 5 different essays, then cut on the dotted line and attach the essay to the scoring guide. You could staple it right on top of here so the student can get some feedback, and you'll notice that not a lot of marks have been written on the paper except for the line numbers. I did put a little bit of voice, writing things like wonderful and delicious and yum. The student's voice is coming out there. Alright. The only other problem that I saw was the word vacuum. It needs a double C and a double U on line number 12 there. Thank you guys, and God bless.